This video will demonstrate how to manage a quote through its workflow life cycles. So firstly, from the merchant module we go into sales, and then from the quote drop down we go to the quote list. From here we can search the quote system using a number of different filters here, and we can click in and view the details of a quote by clicking on the I information icon. So looking at the quote, we've got some information here about who the customer is. We can see when it was prepared and who it was prepared by, and our expected completion and expiry dates. We can also, from the quote line item section here, see any products that have been added. The workflow journal shows us an audit of any changes made to the quote, by who and at what time. The comments section here allows us to add new comments. So we can add a new comment by clicking the new comment button. And then we can either have private or public comments. So the public ones will display on the quote template, so just keep in mind that that's something that the customer will be able to see. We then just click save. From there we can then either edit the comments or delete them if we need to. The related notifications will show us a list of any email notifications that have been triggered from the workflow system, such as sending a copy of the quote to the customer or an email back to the sales rep to notify them of a new quote request. We can also attach documents into the document management system here just by clicking create on the right hand side. From here we just give the document a name. We can choose to name the author of the document, and then we select a file from our local PC to upload. Moving back up to the top of the page here, we have the workflow control, and you'll notice that there's two workflows here. So the first workflow there, the quote processing workflow, is really designed to help in the process of creating a quote and then eventually converting it into an order. So when a quote is first created, its processing workflow status is initialized, which we can see it is at the moment. And while it's in this state, we can add products to the quote and make changes as necessary. Once we've finished with the quote, we then mark it as quoted, and from that stage it can then either get cancelled or closed out, or it eventually gets converted to an order. So if we have a look at the drop down box here with the options that we have, so firstly we can cancel a quote. We can copy a quote, which will take all of the information in this quote and copy it into a new quote, rather than having to recreate some sort of a common quote multiple times. We can edit some of the core information of the quote, like the customer's name and address and so on. We can email it to a customer. We can also email it to somebody else. We can convert it into an order. We can print it to either HTML or PDF, which will just generate it on the screen for you to have a look at. And lastly, we can run the quote transition. So by running the quote transition, the status of the quote will move into quoted, and it will send a PDF version of the quote off to the customer. And so the second workflow there is the quote pipeline workflow, which allows us to track how far along through the pipeline an opportunity might be. So when a quote is first created, the pipeline status is moved into the opportunity created state. So we can see that if we go down to the workflow journal, the top workflow section here relates to our pipeline workflow, and we can see that the opportunity has been created. From the created state, it can then move into the qualified state. From there it can then be considering or seriously considering, and then we can also mark it as a verbal approval being received. Also, at either ends of the opportunity, it can either be marked as lost or won. So from the drop down box we can see there's some corresponding transitions here. And although we just spoke about the different stages throughout the pipeline, you can quickly go to the end of the pipeline workflow without having to step through each of those. So once the opportunity has been created, we can go and mark it as having received the verbal approval, for example, straight away without having to qualify it and mark it as considering or seriously considering. Also, if you do update the status of the quote processing workflow to be cancelled, that will automatically update the pipeline to mark the lead as lost. If you run the order quote transition and convert this to an order, it will automatically mark the opportunity as won and completed. So one of the benefits of accurately tracking your pipeline statuses is that from our sales console, we can select a particular period that we want to look at, and we can very quickly see the funnel here showing us just how many quotes we've got in the pipeline and where they are, how close they are to actually being converted to sales. We've also got the probability graph here, which just gives us a running number of quotes in each of those states, which has a corresponding percentage given the likelihood of converting one of those into a sale.